the government does have a role. What we're saying is to protect individual rights. And then are there proper roles for the government? Again, we're saying yes, the military, the police, the court system. And if you think about what those three things have in common, they're all there to force the bad guys, right, to stop taking away our rights. So they're to protect our rights or secure our rights. This next thing I want you to take a look at here. This is something that I talk about in my book, and if you want to take a look at this later on this evening, you can. What we typically have is, if you think about a line across here, we usually talk in terms of communism is on the far left and fascism is on the far right. I know a lot of you have been taught that since you were in public schools or government schools. Okay, you've been told that that's how it all shakes out. Yeah, I agree with you all. That is just absolutely not true. If you think about what's happening there, communism is on the far left, fascism on the far right, and the examples they usually give you, and I bet it's the same examples you got that I got back in the 19th century when I was in school. Okay, it was probably the same example. They talked about, now, communism over there, the Soviet Union. And then on this side, the example was Nazi Germany. Isn't that the example they gave you? But let's think about this for a second. The Soviet Union over there, USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Okay? And then on this side, Nazi stood for the National, or Beitler, Socialist Partei. It's pretty easy to translate that into English, right? The National Workers' Socialist Party. So there, you have socialism on both extremes. And then somehow we try to, now we really are torturing this model by saying, well, I see Democrats are kind of on the left and Republicans are kind of on the right. That doesn't make a bit of sense. If you think about, though, these different forms of socialism, communism, Nazism, any kind of these isms where the state controls, all of that is eventually going to collapse into statism. And I'm going to try to prove that in a minute here. So the argument I think we got to be making is, I don't want to hear about left and right, and conservative and liberal. The real argument should be along this line. Do you believe in statism? Statism is saying that the state has the ultimate wisdom for you, how your life should be run, as opposed to libertarianism at the top, which I'm going to try to prove to you that that's what the country was founded on, is actually saying the individual has the right and the responsibility to decide how their life should be run. Okay? Don't look too upset yet, so I think I got you all looking so far. Okay, next thing here, let's talk a little bit about the principles of socialism. This ought to upset a few of you. The first thing is here, socialism is immoral. If you look in my book here, the first sentence says, socialism is immoral. And I've had people say, you know, Mike, that's kind of a strong sentence to start a book with. You're going to turn some people off. But I'm going to make the argument that it is immoral. So, is it a moral issue? Yes, I believe it is. The subtitle of my book, the book is called Rational Individualism, and the subtitle is A Moral Argument for Limited Government and Capitalism. Now, if you go back to what Mike talked about in my introduction, I'm a business professor at UNC Greensboro. And I've written some business books, and one book in particular is used in MBA programs around the world. So I think when people picked up this book the first time, they said, oh yeah, we know who he is, he's a business guy, and yeah, he's going to be in favor of capitalism. That wouldn't surprise me. But I think when they picked up the book, they expected me to be given examples like, well, sure, capitalism works, look at Hong Kong. Or look at West Germany versus East Germany, or South Korea versus North Korea. They're good practical examples of why capitalism works. I don't deny any of that. But what I'm arguing is that underneath that there's a moral issue or a philosophical issue that hasn't been, that we typically don't discuss. If you think about what socialism is doing, socialism is the state deciding who they're going to take from and who they're going to give to. That's a moral issue. Now, some of you are probably there sitting and saying, no, that's right, you libertarians don't care about the poor, do you? Actually, I do care about the poor. And I will give voluntarily, but I don't think it's right to be taking it by force. Okay, because that's what the government does when they're taxing you. They're taking it by force and then giving it to somebody of their choice. And now remember, they're not necessarily poor. Are y'all with me on this?
Yeah.
Corporate welfare is not going to the poor. There is no other way to think about that. They are definitely not poor. Okay, so if you think about this as a moral issue, another thing I talk about in my book, and this is another quote, is socialism always leads to violence. Always. If you look at the German Nazi, the nationalists in Germany, the communists in Russia, the Maoists in communist China, all of those led to brutal force. And why? Well, it has to happen, doesn't it? Because you're saying, I'm going to take from these people who have produced it and earned it and give it to people who didn't earn it. Okay? And again, not necessarily the poor. It could be definitely some kind of an elite group that has favor with the current government. Okay? But it's taking from the producers. Okay? And at some point, when you get upset with that, if you're one of the producers, yeah, they're going to have to take it from you by force. Okay, so we talked about principles of libertarianism. Okay, individuals have inalienable rights. Now that's pretty significant too. If we're saying there are inalienable rights, are we saying that the government can give us these rights or the government can take these away?
Nope, they're inalienable.
Yeah, if they're inalienable, they can't be taken away. Okay, so if you think about inalienable rights, one would be you have an inalienable right to your life. Another one is an inalienable right to your liberty, to your freedom. An inalienable right to your property and to the pursuit of happiness. Does that all sound familiar? They're libertarian principles. It sounds like the founding documents to me. Okay, now if you think about when you look at these and you think in terms of these are inalienable rights, I've had somebody stop me before and say, well, Mike, you don't have an inalienable right to property. Yeah, you do. Because what I'll typically get is a pushback where somebody's saying, well, wait a minute. If somebody steals your DVD player, you don't have the DVD player anymore. That's true, but you still have the right to it. Are you with me on that? You can't separate that. Okay, the right is inalienable. Okay, a libertarian vision of society. And I'm going to try to picture this for a minute, because I think a lot of times what happens with libertarians is libertarians are always viewed as being against everything. Oh, we're against that federal program, or we're against that, or we're against this. It sounds like we're against something. So I think a good way to think about this is, how many of you are visual? I'm very visual. I mean, you can stand up here and blah, blah, blah to me forever. And if I can't see it, I don't get it. Okay, so let's try to envision what a libertarian society would look like. So a libertarian vision, I think some of you probably know Mike Munger. Mike Munger ran for governor in 2008 as a libertarian against Pat McCrory and Doug Perdue. Doug Perdue won. I think Mike would have been a much better governor. Frankly, I think Pat McCrory would have been a better governor, but that's another argument. But anyway, Mike Munger was speaking at the Libertarian National Convention in Denver in 2008 before the election. And he was talking about Alexis de Tocqueville. Do any of you know de Tocqueville? Okay, we got some nods on the side and a couple over here too. Okay, Alexis de Tocqueville, for you